Don't sign. The words sliced through the marble boardroom like a blade through silk, because they weren't in English. They were in the exact Arabic dialect the foreign billionaire had just used to quietly slip a harmless clause into a multi-billion-dollar deal. Every head in the room whipped around, only to find a black hotel maid holding a silver tray, standing against the wall like she was supposed to be invisible. Her name tag read Talia Brooks, and she had just warned the room they were about to sign away control of their entire company. The billionaire's face went stone cold. The executives froze. Security radios crackled to life, because in that single moment, the woman they'd never bothered to notice had just become the most dangerous person in the room. Stay with me until the end of this story. Like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey goes. The Belmont Grand wasn't just a hotel. It was a statement. 37 floors of polished granite, hand-carved mahogany, and chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. It was where fortunes were made over cocktails, where handshakes sealed empires, and where people like Talia Brooks were trained to be ghosts. She'd worked there for 3 years. 3 years of ironing napkins into perfect triangles, refilling water glasses before they hit half empty, and answering, "Yes, sir," and "Right away, ma'am," in a voice that never wavered. She wore the same black vest, white shirt, and name tag every shift. She moved through conference rooms like air, present, essential, invisible. That was the job. Be there. Don't be seen. But Talia had a gift that no one knew about, a gift she'd kept hidden behind polite smiles and lowered eyes, a gift that was about to shatter everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when her world tilted. She'd been assigned to the Azure Boardroom, top floor, reserved for what the staff called the untouchables, the kind of meeting where the catering budget alone could fund a small school. Talia had set up the room herself that morning, sparkling water in crystal decanters, imported pastries arranged like art, leather portfolios at every seat. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. By 1:50, the room was filling. Talia recognized some of the faces from business magazines left behind in suites. There was Marcus Delroy, CEO of Delroy & Klein Investment Group, a man whose net worth had its own Wikipedia page. Beside him sat Jennifer Oakes, the company's sharp-eyed CFO, known for closing deals that made competitors weep. Around the table were attorneys, advisors, and executives whose combined salaries could buy a small island. And then there was Rafiq Al-Karim. He entered like weather, quiet, inevitable, impossible to ignore. Mid-50s, impeccably tailored charcoal suit, silver cufflinks that caught the light just so. His translator, a thin man in wire-rimmed glasses, stayed 2 steps behind. Rafiq's handshake was firm but brief. His smile never reached his eyes. Talia knew who he was. Everyone did. Rafiq Al-Karim was a Qatari investor with a portfolio that spanned 3 continents. He'd made billions in energy, real estate, and strategic acquisitions. He was known for 2 things: impeccable taste and ruthless efficiency. Today, he was here to finalize a partnership with Delroy & Klein, a deal worth north of $2 billion. Talia stood against the far wall, tray in hand, watching the way money moved. How it smiled, how it spoke in measured tones and expensive cologne. "Gentlemen, Miss Oakes," Rafiq began, his accent crisp and cultured, "I believe we're ready to proceed." His translator began distributing thick leather-bound folders. Inside each was the final draft of the partnership agreement, pages of dense legal language, annexes, schedules, and signature blocks. Marcus Delroy flipped through his copy, nodding. "This is excellent work, Rafiq. I think we've addressed every concern." "Indeed," Rafiq replied smoothly. "My team has been very thorough." Jennifer Oakes scanned the executive summary, her pen tapping against the table. "The equity split is clean. The governance structure is clear. I'm comfortable moving forward." One of the senior attorneys, a man named Palmer with silver hair and a Rolex that could blind someone, leaned forward. "I've reviewed the subsidiaries clause, the indemnification language, the dispute resolution framework. It's all standard, best practices across the board." Rafiq inclined his head graciously. "I appreciate your diligence, Mr. Palmer." Talia refilled a water glass. No one looked at her. The conversation continued, technical, cordial, confident. Pens were being uncapped, signature pages were being turned to. And then Rafik did something subtle. He leaned toward his translator and murmured something in Arabic. His voice was low, conversational, the tone of someone asking about lunch plans. The translator nodded and made a note. Talia's hand froze over the water pitcher. She knew Arabic, not textbook Arabic, not the formal, classical kind taught in universities. She knew Levantine Arabic, the living, breathing dialect of the streets, markets, and homes. She'd grown up speaking it with her grandmother, a Syrian immigrant who'd raised her after her parents died. Teta Amira had filled their small apartment with stories, music, and a language that felt like home. Talia had never told anyone at the Belmont. Why would she? It wasn't on the job application. It didn't help her fold napkins faster, but she'd just heard Rafik say something that made her blood run cold. He hadn't been asking about lunch. He'd said in Arabic, "Make sure the override clause is still buried in Section 12. They won't catch it." The translator had smiled and replied, "Already confirmed, sir. Clean insertion." Talia's pulse hammered in her ears. Override clause. She glanced at the contract in Marcus Delroy's hands. He was turning to the signature page, confident and ready. No one else had understood. No one else knew. Talia looked at Rafik. His face was calm, pleasant, perfectly composed. He was a man about to win something, and no one in the room had any idea. Her hands trembled. She thought about her job, her rent, her grandmother's medical bills. She thought about the invisible rules she'd learned from day one. Don't ask questions. Don't make waves. Don't get noticed. But she also thought about her grandmother's voice, low and fierce in the kitchen late at night. Talia Habibti, you have a brain and a tongue. If you see wrong and say nothing, you become part of it. Talia set down the water pitcher. She stepped forward. Don't sign. Her voice cut through the room like a bell in a library. Every head turned. Marcus Delroy blinked at her, confused. Excuse me? Jennifer Oakes frowned. Is there a problem with the service? Rafik's eyes locked onto Talia. His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his gaze. Talia swallowed. Her throat was dry, but her voice came out steady. Don't sign the contract, there's a problem. Palmer, the attorney, looked at her like she'd just grown a second head. I'm sorry. Who are you? Talia gestured to her name tag. I'm Talia Brooks. I work here. Right, Palmer said slowly, his tone dripping condescension. And you're interrupting a multi-billion-dollar negotiation because... Talia looked directly at Rafik. Because he just told his translator to make sure the override clause in Section 12 is still buried, and that you won't catch it. The room went silent. Rafik's face remained perfectly neutral, but his translator's eyes widened, just a fraction. Marcus Delroy set down his pen. What did you just say? I speak Arabic, Talia said, her voice gaining strength. I understood what he said. There's a clause in Section 12 that isn't what you think it is. Jennifer Oakes's eyes narrowed. How do you know what Section 12 says? I don't, Talia admitted, but I know what he said, and I know what override clause means in a contract like this. Palmer let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. This is absurd. Security... Wait. It was Marcus Delroy. He held up one hand, his gaze fixed on Talia. You speak Arabic? Yes, sir. And you understood what Mr. Al-Karim said to his translator? Yes, sir. Rafik finally spoke, his voice smooth as glass. This is a misunderstanding. My conversation with my colleague was private and unrelated to the contract. Then what did you say? Talia asked. Rafik smiled, polite, patronizing. I don't believe I need to explain my private conversations to hotel staff. You don't, Talia agreed. But they might want to know before they sign. Jennifer Oakes flipped open her copy of the contract and turned to Section 12. Her eyes scanned the page, then scanned again. Marcus, she said quietly. Look at this. He leaned over. Palmer joined them. Talia's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack a rib. After a long, terrible silence, Marcus Delroy looked up. Ms. Brooks, he said slowly, what exactly did you hear? Talia repeated it, word for word, in Arabic first, then in English. Rafiq's translator had gone pale. Palmer grabbed his own copy and started reading Section 12 aloud. His voice faltered halfway through. This isn't standard language. What does it say? Marcus demanded. Palmer's face had lost all color. It says that in the event of any dispute regarding operational authority, decision-making power defaults retroactively to the majority equity holder as determined by a pre-agreed valuation schedule that we never negotiated. Which means, Jennifer asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. Which means, Palmer said, his voice hollow, that if this clause activates, Rafiq doesn't just get equal partnership. He gets controlling authority over every decision we've made since the partnership began, retroactively. The room exploded. Marcus slammed the contract onto the table. What the hell is this, Rafiq? Rafiq remained seated, utterly composed. You're overreacting. That language is a standard protection mechanism. Bullshit, Jennifer snapped. This is a hostile takeover buried in legal jargon. Palmer was flipping through pages now, his hands shaking. There are references here I didn't see in the preliminary drafts. Subsection clauses that weren't highlighted. If we'd signed this, we'd have handed him the company. Marcus finished, his voice barely above a whisper. All eyes turned to Talia. She stood there, tray still in hand, name tag crooked, heart racing. Marcus Delroy rose slowly from his chair. He walked over to her and extended his hand. Ms. Brooks, he said, his voice thick with something that might have been awe or fury or both. You just saved my company. Talia shook his hand, her fingers trembling, and then the door burst open. A woman in a steel gray suit strode in, her heels clicking like gunfire against the marble floor. She was in her early 50s, with sharp cheekbones, silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, and eyes that could cut diamonds. Evelyn Hart, general manager of the Belmont Grand. Behind her was Talia's direct supervisor, Gerald, a nervous man with a clipboard and a permanent sheen of sweat on his forehead. Ms. Brooks, Evelyn said, her voice crisp and cold. Step outside, now. Talia's stomach dropped. Ms. Hart, Marcus began, this woman just... I'm aware, Mr. Delroy, Evelyn interrupted smoothly, and I will handle this. Miss Brooks, outside. Talia set down her tray with shaking hands and followed Evelyn into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them. Gerald was wringing his hands. Ms. Hart, I had no idea she would... she's never... Gerald, Evelyn said without looking at him, go back to your station. But now... He scurried away. Evelyn turned to Talia, her expression unreadable. Talia braced herself for the axe to fall. Instead, Evelyn asked very quietly, Do you understand what you just did? I stopped them from signing a bad deal. You interrupted a private meeting between some of the most powerful people in this city. You contradicted a foreign investor worth billions. You bypassed chain of command, protocol, and every rule in the employee handbook. Talia's throat tightened. I know. I'm sorry. You, Evelyn continued, her voice still low, may have just prevented the biggest legal disaster this firm has seen in a decade. Talia blinked. What? Evelyn's eyes were sharp, calculating. I've been GM here for 15 years. I've seen a lot of deals, a lot of contracts, and I've learned that the people in that room, they're brilliant, but they're also arrogant. They assume no one outside their circle understands the game. She stepped closer. But you do, don't you? Talia hesitated. I understand languages. And I understand when someone's trying to hide something. Evelyn's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. How good is your Arabic? Fluent. My grandmother... Can you read contracts? I've never tried. Evelyn pulled a slim tablet from her bag and opened a file. This is the full draft agreement. The one Rafiq's team submitted 2 weeks ago. I want you to go through it, tonight. Mark every section that doesn't match what Palmer and Delroy's attorneys approved. Talia stared at the screen. You want me to review a multi-billion-dollar contract? I want you to find the traps, Evelyn corrected. Because if there's one, there are more. And I need to know what we're dealing with before that meeting reconvenes tomorrow morning. Why me? Evelyn's gaze was steady, unflinching. Because you're the only person in this building who saw it, and because you're not afraid to say what everyone else is too polite or too stupid to notice. She handed Talia the tablet. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't disappoint me. And with that, Evelyn Hart turned and walked back into the boardroom, leaving Talia standing in the hallway with a tablet in her hands and the weight of $1 billion deal on her shoulders. Talia took the service elevator down, her mind spinning. She should have been fired. She should have been escorted out by security with her belongings in a cardboard box. Instead, she'd been handed a contract and a deadline. She rode the subway home in a daze, clutching the tablet like it might explode. Her apartment was a small one-bedroom in a neighborhood that real estate agents called emerging and residents called cheap. The walls were thin, the radiator clanged, and the lock stuck every time. But it was hers. She made a pot of coffee, pulled out her grandmother's old reading glasses, the ones Teta Amira used to wear while reviewing bills and legal papers from the immigration office, and opened the file. The contract was 247 pages long. Talia took a breath and started reading. At first, it was overwhelming. The language was dense, technical, full of terms like subordinated equity tranches and fiduciary escalation pathways. But Talia had something most attorneys didn't. She could read the Arabic annotations in the margins. Yes. And that's where the patterns started to emerge. Certain clauses had been flagged in Arabic with phrases like confirmed insertion and secondary approval bypass. There were references to subsections that didn't appear in the English table of contents. There were footnotes that redirected to annexes, that redirected to schedules that redirected back to clauses that had been subtly reworded. It was a shell game. A brilliant, elegant, vicious shell game. By 3 a.m., Talia had filled 6 pages with notes. By 5 a.m., she'd mapped the entire structure. By 7:30, she was standing outside the Belmont in the same clothes she'd worn the day before, holding a printed report and running on nothing but caffeine and adrenaline. Evelyn Hart met her in the lobby. You look terrible, Evelyn observed. I didn't sleep. Did you find anything? Talia handed her the report. Evelyn scanned it. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on the paper tightened. 12 traps, Evelyn murmured. 12 separate points of compromise. 13, Talia corrected quietly. The last one's in the payment schedule. It looks like a clerical error, but it reroutes funds through a subsidiary that doesn't exist yet, which means Rafiq controls where the money actually goes. Evelyn looked up, her eyes blazing. Ms. Brooks, she said softly, go home, shower, change, and be back here at noon. Why? Evelyn's smile was sharp as a scalpel. Because you're not serving coffee today. You're sitting at the table. Talia had never owned anything that could be called professional. Her closet was a collection of thrift store finds, hand-me-downs from her grandmother, and the 2 black work vests the Belmont had issued her. She stood in front of the mirror at 11:15, staring at the only option that didn't scream, I clean hotel rooms for a living. A gray dress, simple knee-length with long sleeves and a modest neckline. It had belonged to Teta Amira, worn to citizenship interviews and parent-teacher conferences back when Talia was still in elementary school. The fabric was thin in places. The hem had been restitched twice, but it was clean and it fit. She twisted her hair into a low bun, the way her grandmother used to wear it. No jewelry except the small gold stud earrings Teta had given her on her 18th birthday. She looked at herself one more time and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom. She looked like a liar. The subway ride back to the Belmont felt longer than it should have. Every stop, every delay, every moment stretched thin with the weight of what she was about to do. She clutched the folder Evelyn had given her, a clean copy of her analysis, formatted and printed on expensive paper that felt wrong in her hands. When she arrived, the lobby was buzzing with the usual midday energy. Guests checking in, valets loading luggage, the concierge directing a family toward the elevators. No one looked at her twice. She was still invisible, even in her grandmother's dress. But when she reached the 37th floor, everything changed. Evelyn was waiting outside the Azure boardroom, flanked by 2 security guards and a man Talia didn't recognize. Mid-40s, expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Talia's rent. Miss Brooks, Evelyn said, her tone all business. This is Richard Dane, senior partner at Hale and Griffith. He'll be joining us as independent counsel. Richard extended a hand. His grip was firm, assessing. Ms. Hart has briefed me on your findings. Impressive work. Talia shook his hand, her mouth dry. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Richard said with a slight smile. If you're wrong, this gets very ugly very fast. She's not wrong, Evelyn said flatly. She turned to Talia. Ready? Talia wanted to say no. She wanted to run back down to the service elevator, clock in, and disappear into the safety of insignificance. Instead, she nodded. Evelyn opened the door. The room fell silent. Marcus Delroy sat at the head of the table, his expression grim. Jennifer Oakes was beside him, her laptop open, her eyes sharp and tired. Palmer, the silver-haired attorney, looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. And across from them, perfectly composed, sat Rafiq Al-Karim. His translator was absent. Rafiq's gaze slid to Talia, and for a brief, chilling moment, his eyes held hers. No anger. No surprise, just cold, clinical assessment. Evelyn gestured to an empty chair beside Richard Dane. Miss Brooks, please sit. Talia walked to the chair on legs that felt borrowed. She sat, placed her folder on the table, and folded her hands to keep them from shaking. Marcus Delroy spoke first. Ms. Brooks, yesterday you made a serious accusation. We've spent the last 18 hours reviewing the contract with our legal team. What we found... He paused, his jaw tight. What we found suggests you were right to speak up. Palmer cleared his throat. We identified the override clause you mentioned. We've also found several other irregularities. Irregularities, Rafiq repeated, his voice smooth and unbothered. That's a strong word for standard protective language. Protective for whom? Jennifer shot back. Rafiq spread his hands in a gesture of openness. For both parties. These agreements are complex. Misinterpretation is common. Then help us interpret, Marcus said coldly. Explain Section 12, Subsection 4, Paragraph 9. The part about retroactive operational authority. Rafiq didn't miss a beat. That clause ensures continuity in the event of deadlock. It's designed to prevent paralysis in critical decision-making moments. By giving you total control, Jennifer said. By providing a clear hierarchy, Rafiq corrected, which you agreed to in principle during our negotiations. We agreed to partnership, Marcus said, not surrender. The tension in the room was a living thing, coiled and ready to strike. Evelyn stepped forward. Mr. Al-Karim, I think it would be productive if Ms. Brooks walked us through her analysis, since she's the one who identified the discrepancies. Rafiq's eyes flicked to Talia. I'm sure Ms. Brooks is very thorough, but with all due respect, this is a matter for legal professionals. Ms. Brooks is here at my request, Evelyn said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. And Mr. Delroy has agreed to hear her findings. So, unless you have an objection that goes beyond professional pride, I suggest we proceed. Rafiq leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. By all means. Talia opened her folder. Her hands were steadier now. She'd spent hours with these pages. She knew them better than she knew her own reflection. The override clause isn't the only problem, she began, her voice quiet but firm. It's part of a pattern. There are 13 separate points in this contract where control, authority, or financial flow has been redirected in ways that weren't disclosed in the preliminary drafts. Palmer frowned. 13? We found 7. You found the obvious ones, Talia said. She turned to a flagged page. This is Section 18, the payment routing schedule. It lists a subsidiary called Crescent Holdings as the intermediary for fund transfers. That's standard, Rafiq interjected. Crescent Holdings is a registered entity in Dubai. It's registered, Talia agreed, but it doesn't exist yet. According to the incorporation timeline buried in Annex F, Crescent Holdings won't be operational until 60 days after the partnership agreement is signed, which means for the first 2 months, every payment goes into a holding account that you control directly, with no oversight. Jennifer's fingers flew across her keyboard. He's right. Annex F, Clause 12. It's hidden in the compliance appendix. She, Evelyn corrected mildly, Ms. Brooks is a woman. Jennifer didn't look up. Sorry, she's right. Marcus turned to Rafik. You want us to funnel millions into an account we can't audit for 2 months? It's a procedural necessity, Rafik said smoothly. Entity formation takes time. This ensures continuity of operations. Or it ensures you have access to our capital before we have access to accountability, Jennifer countered. Talia turned another page. There's more. Section 23 outlines dispute resolution. It says any conflicts go to binding arbitration in Qatar, under Qatari commercial law, with arbitrators selected from a pre-approved panel. Palmer's face went white. We didn't approve that panel. You didn't see it, Talia said. It's referenced in a footnote that redirects to Schedule K, which wasn't included in the version you reviewed. The actual schedule is in the Arabic language appendix. Richard Dane leaned forward, his expression sharp. You're saying there's a separate Arabic appendix that modifies the English terms. Not modifies, Talia corrected. Clarifies, but the clarifications change the meaning. In the English version, the arbitration clause says mutually agreed panel. In the Arabic footnote, it says panel as previously established by primary equity holder. Which is you, Marcus said to Rafik, his voice dangerously calm. Rafik's composure finally cracked. Just a fraction. His jaw tightened. These are translations. Nuance is difficult. Nuance, Talia repeated. She met his gaze. The word you used yesterday wasn't nuance. It was insertion. Clean insertion. The room went dead silent. Rafik's eyes turned to ice. Jennifer closed her laptop. I want every Arabic document translated by an independent firm, today. Agreed, Marcus said, and I want a full forensic review of every subsidiary, every transfer route, and every entity referenced in this contract. That will take weeks, Rafik said. Then it takes weeks, Marcus replied, because we're not signing anything until we know exactly what we're agreeing to. Rafik stood slowly, his movements controlled. Gentlemen, Ms. Oakes, it seems we've reached an impasse. Perhaps it's best if we table this discussion until cooler heads prevail. We're not tabling anything, Jennifer said. We're renegotiating, from scratch. Rafik's smile was thin and cold. I don't renegotiate. Then we don't sign, Marcus said simply. For a long moment, Rafik said nothing. Then he picked up his copy of the contract, closed it with a quiet snap, and turned toward the door. He paused beside Talia's chair. Miss Brooks, he said softly, his accent precise. You've made quite an impression. It wasn't a compliment. He left. The door closed behind him, and the room exhaled as one. Marcus slumped in his chair, rubbing his face. What the hell just happened? You almost lost everything, Richard Dane said bluntly. And she stopped it. He nodded toward Talia. Palmer was staring at her like she was a creature from another planet. How did you catch all of this? You're a server, Talia finished. I know. I was going to say linguist, Palmer said quietly, because that's what you are. Evelyn placed a hand on Talia's shoulder. Ms. Brooks, would you mind stepping outside for a moment? I need to speak with Mr. Delroy privately. Talia nodded and rose, gathering her folder. As she reached the door, Marcus called out. Ms. Brooks? She turned. Thank you, he said. I mean that. Talia nodded again, not trusting her voice, and slipped into the hallway. She leaned against the wall, her heart hammering. She'd just gone toe-to-toe with a billionaire. She'd just dismantled a contract in front of people who'd spent their entire careers doing exactly that. And she'd survived. The door opened. Evelyn stepped out, followed by Richard Dane. Walk with me, Evelyn said. They took the elevator down in silence. Evelyn led her through the lobby, past the front desk, and into a small private office tucked behind the concierge station. She closed the door and gestured for Talia to sit. You did well in there, Evelyn said. I just read what was written. No, Evelyn corrected. You saw what was hidden. There's a difference. She sat on the edge of the desk, her gaze intent. How much do you know about corporate fraud? Talia blinked. Nothing, really. Why? Because what you found today wasn't just aggressive contract language. It was a trap. A sophisticated, multi-layered trap designed to transfer control and capital without detection. That kind of structure doesn't happen by accident. You think Rafiq planned this from the start? I think Rafiq is very good at what he does, Evelyn said carefully. And I think he's done it before, which means someone on the inside helped him. Talia's stomach dropped. Inside Delroy and Klein? Inside or adjacent. Someone who knew the approval process, the review timeline, who had access to draft documents before they were finalized. Evelyn crossed her arms. I need you to help me find them. Me? I don't. You have access to the contract archives, Evelyn said. You have language skills no one else has. And you're invisible. Talia flinched. Evelyn's expression softened. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as an advantage. People don't see you coming. They underestimate you. And right now, that's exactly what we need. What are you asking me to do? Evelyn pulled a thin file from her desk drawer and handed it to Talia. This is a list of every document related to the Rafiq deal, preliminary drafts, emails, meeting notes, revision logs. I need you to go through them, look for patterns, look for discrepancies, look for anything that suggests someone was feeding information to Rafiq's team. Talia opened the file. It was hundreds of pages. This will take days, she said. You have 3, Evelyn replied, because in 3 days, Marcus Delroy is meeting with the board to decide whether to pursue legal action or walk away. And I want to make sure we know who we're really fighting. Talia looked up. What if I don't find anything? Then we move forward with what we have, Evelyn said. But I don't think that's going to happen, because you've already proven you see things other people miss. Talia hesitated. Why are you trusting me with this? Evelyn smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. Because yesterday you had every reason to stay silent. You could have kept your job, stayed safe, avoided all of this. But you didn't. You spoke up. And that tells me more about who you are than any resume ever could. She stood and walked to the door. Go home. Get some sleep. Start fresh tomorrow. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. And Talia? Be careful. Whoever's on the inside won't want to be found. Talia left the Belmont with the file tucked under her arm, and Evelyn's warning echoing in her head. She didn't go home. She went to the public library. It was quieter there, safer, anonymous. She found a corner desk near the back, spread out the documents, and started reading. The preliminary drafts were clean. Standard partnership language, equitable terms, nothing hidden. But as the revisions progressed, subtle changes began to appear. A reworded clause here, a shifted subsection there, references to new annexes that hadn't existed in prior versions. And then she found the email. It was buried in a forwarded chain dated 6 weeks earlier. The subject line was innocuous, by draft revisions per discussion. The sender was someone named G. Holloway, listed as outside counsel for Delroy and Klein. The body of the email was brief. Rafiq's team requested clarification on governance structure. I've incorporated the language we discussed. See attached. The attachment was a red-lined version of Section 12, the override clause. Talia's hands went cold. She cross-referenced the name. Grant Holloway, senior partner at Mercer Stone, a white shoe law firm with offices in New York, London, and Dubai. He'd been Delroy and Klein's primary outside counsel for over a decade. Awards, accolades, a reputation for closing impossible deals. And he'd inserted the override clause himself. Talia kept digging. More emails, more revisions, all from Holloway. All framed as client-requested clarifications, all adding layers of control that benefited Rafiq. And then, at the bottom of one email chain, she found something that made her blood freeze. A brief reply from Holloway to someone with a Qatari email domain. Confirmed, all provisions in place, transfer route secured, payment on completion as agreed. Talia sat back, her mind racing. Grant Holloway wasn't helping Delroy and Klein. He was selling them out. She photographed the email with her phone, her hands shaking. Then she closed the file, packed up her things, and headed for the subway. She didn't notice the man in the gray overcoat sitting 3 tables away. She didn't see him follow her out. Talia's apartment felt different when she got home. Too quiet. Too still. She locked the door, checked the windows, and sat on the edge of her bed with the file in her lap. She should call Evelyn. She should report what she'd found. But something stopped her. If Holloway was inside counsel, he had access to everything. He knew who was investigating. He knew what was being reviewed. And if he'd sold out a multi-billion-dollar deal, he wouldn't hesitate to bury anyone who threatened to expose him. Talia pulled out her phone and started typing an email to Evelyn. Then stopped. Emails could be traced. She grabbed a notebook and started writing by hand, then stopped. Handwriting could be identified. She was spiraling. A knock at the door made her jump. She crept to the peephole. No one there. Another knock, louder. "Miss Brooks!" The voice was male, calm, professional. "I need to speak with you." Talia's pulse spiked. "Who are you?" "My name is Grant Holloway. I'm an attorney with Delroy and Klein. I believe you have some questions about the contract you reviewed." Talia's heart stopped. He was here, outside her door. "How did you find me?" she called, her voice shaking. "Your address is in the hotel employee records," Holloway said easily. "I'm not here to threaten you, Ms. Brooks. I'm here to help." "I don't need help." "I think you do." His voice was closer now, like he was leaning against the door. "You've stumbled into something much bigger than a bad contract, and if you're smart, you'll let me explain before you do something you'll regret." Talia backed away from the door, her mind racing. "I'm calling the police," she said. "Go ahead," Holloway replied. "Tell them a lawyer came to your apartment to discuss a contract. See how seriously they take it." He paused. "Or you could open the door and let me show you why staying silent is in everyone's best interest, including yours." Talia's hand hovered over her phone. "I have proof," she said. "Emails, documents, everything you did." There was a long silence. Then Holloway laughed, soft, almost admiring. "You really are sharp," he said. "Evelyn chose well." Another pause. "But proof only matters if you're alive to present it." The words hit like a physical blow. "Are you threatening me?" Talia whispered. "I'm offering you a choice," Holloway said. "Open the door, hear me out, or spend the rest of your very short career looking over your shoulder." Talia's vision blurred. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She heard footsteps retreating down the hall, a door opening and closing. Then silence. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, her phone clutched in her hand. Grant Holloway knew where she lived. He knew what she'd found. And he'd just made it very clear what happened to people who got in his way. Talia didn't sleep that night. She sat with her back against the door, phone in one hand, her grandmother's old kitchen knife in the other. Every creak of the building made her flinch. Every footstep in the hallway outside sent her heart into her throat. By the time pale gray light seeped through the blinds, she'd replayed Holloway's words 100 times, each repetition sharpening the edge of fear until it felt like a blade pressed against her ribs. Proof only matters if you're alive to present it. At 6 a.m., she gave up on the idea of rest. She showered with the bathroom door locked, dressed in clothes that felt like armor, and slipped the photographed emails onto a thumb drive she buried in the bottom of her purse. Then she did something her grandmother had taught her years ago, back when Teta Amira was navigating immigration hearings and lawyers who smiled while they lied. She made copies. 3 of them. One she mailed to herself at a P.O. box she'd opened in college and never closed. One she left in a sealed envelope with her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old woman who asked no questions and forgot nothing. And one she uploaded to a cloud account under a name that wasn't hers. If something happened to her, the evidence wouldn't disappear. She arrived at the Belmont just after 7, too early for her shift but too wired to stay home. The lobby was quiet, the morning crew moving through their routines with the efficient silence of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Talia slipped past the front desk and took the service elevator up, her pulse hammering with every floor. When she reached Evelyn's office, the door was already open. Evelyn sat behind her desk, reading something on her tablet, a cup of black coffee steaming beside her. She looked up as Talia entered, her sharp eyes taking in everything, the circles under Talia's eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her purse like a lifeline. "You look like hell," Evelyn said. "Grant Holloway came to my apartment last night." Evelyn went very still. She set down the tablet slowly. her expression shifting from concern to something colder, more dangerous. Tell me exactly what happened. Talia recounted every word, every pause, every threat wrapped in politeness. When she finished, Evelyn's jaw was tight enough to crack stone. He threatened you. He offered me a choice, Talia said, echoing Holloway's phrasing. But yeah, it was a threat. Evelyn stood and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "Did you find something?" Talia pulled out her phone and showed Evelyn the photographed email. He inserted the override clause himself. And he's been paid by Rafiq's team to do it. There's a paper trail. Evelyn read the screen, her expression unreadable. Then she handed the phone back. This changes everything. I made copies, Talia said. Multiple. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you, Evelyn interrupted, her voice hard. Not on my watch. She returned to her desk and picked up her phone. I'm calling Marcus Delroy. We're moving up the timeline. What timeline? The one where we take Holloway down before he buries us all. Evelyn made 3 calls in rapid succession. Marcus, Richard Dane, and someone she referred to only as our security consultant. Each conversation was brief, clipped, and left no room for argument. By the time she hung up, Talia felt like she was watching a general mobilize for war. There's a meeting at 9, Evelyn said. Marcus, Jennifer, Palmer, Richard, and a fraud investigator named Sarah Voss. You're going to present everything you found, and then we're going to set a trap. A trap? For Holloway. Evelyn's smile was sharp and cold. If he's willing to threaten you, he's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. We're going to give him the opportunity to make a very big one. Talia swallowed hard. What do you need me to do? Exactly what you've been doing, Evelyn said. Tell the truth, and don't back down. The meeting convened in a smaller conference room on the 35th floor, one without windows and with a lock on the door. Marcus Delroy looked like he hadn't slept either, his tie loose and his expression grim. Jennifer Oakes was already at her laptop, her fingers moving across the keys with surgical precision. Palmer sat in the corner, pale and shaken, like he'd seen his entire career flash before his eyes. Richard Dane was calm, professional, taking notes on a legal pad. And then there was Sarah Voss. She was in her early 40s with cropped dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of stillness that came from years of watching people lie. She worked for a firm that specialized in corporate investigations, fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, the kind of cases that ended with handcuffs and headlines. Evelyn made the introductions, and Sarah shook Talia's hand with a grip that felt like a test. Ms. Brooks, Sarah said. I've reviewed the materials Ms. Hart sent over. Impressive work. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Sarah replied, echoing Richard's words from days earlier. If this goes where I think it's going, things are going to get very ugly very fast. Are you prepared for that? Talia met her gaze. I'm here, aren't I? Sarah's mouth curved into something that might have been approval. Fair enough. She turned to the room. Let's start with what we know. Talia walked them through her findings, the emails, the revisions, the payment confirmation. She showed them the timestamps, the metadata, the digital fingerprints that tied Holloway to every compromised clause. When she finished, the room was silent. Marcus rubbed his face. Grant Holloway has been our outside counsel for 12 years. 12 years. How did we miss this? Because he was careful, Sarah said, and because you trusted him. That's how this works. The best frauds are built on relationships. How much did he take? Jennifer asked, her voice tight. Sarah consulted her notes. Based on the contract structure and the payment confirmation Ms. Brooks found, I estimate Holloway was promised a percentage of Rafiq's equity stake once the deal closed, roughly $8 to $12 million. Palmer made a strangled sound. Jesus Christ, Marcus muttered. There's more, Sarah continued. I pulled Holloway's financial records, bank statements, tax returns, property holdings. 3 months ago, he purchased a villa in the Maldives, cash $2 million. $2 million. A week later, his wife filed for divorce. He's liquidating assets, setting up offshore accounts, and preparing to disappear. So he was planning to screw us and run, Jennifer said. Essentially, yes. Richard leaned forward. Can we prove intent? Because without that, a defense attorney will argue he was just doing what Rafiq asked, no knowledge of fraud. We can prove intent, Sarah said, but we need Holloway to confirm it, preferably on record. Evelyn spoke for the first time since the meeting started. That's where the trap comes in. Everyone turned to her. Holloway thinks he's in control, Evelyn said. He threatened Ms. Brooks because he believes she's isolated, vulnerable, easy to silence. We're going to let him keep thinking that, and then we're going to give him exactly what he wants, a conversation with her, recorded. Talia's stomach dropped. You want me to meet with him? I want you to let him think he's won, Evelyn corrected. You reach out. You tell him you're scared. You ask for a deal. He'll offer you money, protection, maybe even a new job. And when he does, he'll incriminate himself. That's insane, Talia said. It's strategic, Sarah countered. Men like Holloway have egos. They believe they're smarter than everyone else. If you play into that, he'll talk, and we'll have everything we need. What if he doesn't talk? Talia asked. What if he just... She couldn't finish the sentence. He won't, Evelyn said firmly, because you won't be alone. Sarah's team will be monitoring, Richard will be on standby, and I'll be close enough to step in if anything goes sideways. Marcus looked at Talia, his expression conflicted. Miss Brooks, you don't have to do this. We can pursue other avenues. Other avenues take time, Sarah said. And time gives Holloway the chance to destroy evidence, flee the country, or worse, hurt someone. If we move now, we end this clean. Talia thought about the knife she'd held last night, the copies she'd made, the fear that had followed her like a shadow since Holloway knocked on her door. And then she thought about her grandmother's voice. If you see wrong and say nothing, you become part of it. I'll do it, Talia said. Evelyn's eyes held hers. You're sure? No, Talia admitted, but I'll do it anyway. Sarah spent the next hour prepping Talia. They rehearsed scenarios, scripted openings, identified trigger phrases that would get Holloway talking. Sarah fitted Talia with a recording device, a small pin that looked like costume jewelry but captured audio with crystal clarity. She also gave Talia a panic button disguised as a keychain. One press and Sarah's team would move in. You're not a trained operative, Sarah said bluntly. So don't try to be. Just be scared. Be uncertain. Let him think he's saving you. The more he talks, the more rope he gives us. At 11, Talia sent the email. It was short, shaky, exactly what a frightened hotel worker would write. Mr. Holloway, I've been thinking about what you said. I don't want trouble. Can we talk? Please. The response came 4 minutes later. Smart decision. Meet me at Gramercy Park, South Entrance, 2 p.m. Come alone. Talia showed the message to Sarah, who smiled grimly. Public location. He thinks it's safe. Good. We'll have eyes everywhere. At 1:30, Talia left the Belmont wearing the same gray dress, the recording pin fastened to her collar, the panic button tucked in her pocket. Sarah's team had already deployed, 2 agents posing as joggers, one as a street vendor, another reading on a bench. Evelyn was in a car half a block away, watching a live feed from a camera embedded in Talia's purse. Talia walked through the iron gates of Gramercy Park, her heart a drumbeat in her ears. The park was small, elegant, surrounded by historic townhouses and old money. A handful of people strolled the paths, nannies with children, elderly couples, tourists taking photos. And on a bench near the south entrance sat Grant Holloway. He looked every inch the successful attorney, tailored navy suit, Italian leather shoes, a wool overcoat draped over the bench beside him. His hair was silver at the temples, his smile warm and disarming. He stood as Talia approached, extending a hand. Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. Talia shook his hand, her palm damp. You didn't give me much choice. I gave you the only choice that makes sense, Holloway said smoothly. He gestured to the bench. Please, sit. She sat, keeping space between them. Holloway settled beside her, his posture relaxed. I know last night was frightening. I apologize for that, but I needed you to understand the gravity of what you've uncovered. You mean the fraud, Talia said quietly. Holloway's smile didn't waver. I mean the complexity. Ms. Brooks, you're a smart woman, smarter than anyone gave you credit for. But what you're seeing as fraud is actually strategy. High-level negotiation, the kind of nuance that takes years to understand. You sold out your client. I protected my client, Holloway corrected. Marcus Delroy is brilliant, but he's impulsive. The deal with Rafik was going to happen one way or another. I simply ensured it happened on terms that preserved value for everyone involved. Everyone except Delroy and Klein, Holloway sighed as if explaining to a child. Short-term sacrifice for long-term stability. Rafik is a visionary. Under his guidance, Delroy and Klein will triple in value within 5 years. Marcus just can't see it yet because his ego is in the way. And the $8 million you were promised? Talia asked. That's just consulting fees? Holloway's eyes sharpened. You've been busy. You came to my apartment and threatened me, Talia said, her voice shaking, not in act. I wanted to know who I was dealing with. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Here's what I like about you, Ms. Brooks. You're honest. You don't pretend to be something you're not. So I'm going to be honest with you. He paused, letting the moment settle. Yes, I've facilitated terms that benefit Rafik. Yes, I've been compensated for that work. And yes, if this comes to light in the wrong way, it will destroy careers. Mine, Marcus's, possibly yours. But it doesn't have to. What are you offering? Talia asked. Security, Holloway said. I can arrange a position for you at a firm in Singapore. Good salary, full benefits, visa sponsorship. You'll be out of the country, out of reach, and out of this mess. In exchange, you forget what you found. You delete the files. You walk away. And if I don't? Holloway's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped an octave. Then you become a liability, and liabilities get managed. Talia's blood ran cold. You'd hurt me. I wouldn't, Holloway said calmly, but the people Rafik works with, they don't have my scruples. You exposed a multi-billion-dollar operation. Do you really think they're going to let a hotel maid walk away with evidence? The words hit like a fist. You're scared, Holloway continued, his tone almost kind. I understand, but fear is only useful if it leads to smart decisions. Take the offer, Ms. Brooks. Disappear. Live a good life. Or stay, and find out exactly how deep this goes. Talia's hand moved to her pocket, fingers brushing the panic button. And then Holloway said the thing Sarah had been waiting for. I've done this before, you know, facilitated transitions. The Bergman merger in 2019. The Castellan acquisition last year. Both times, there were people who found inconsistencies. Both times I offered them the same deal. Most took it. The ones who didn't, he shrugged. Well, they're not in positions to complain anymore. Talia pressed the button. Within seconds, Sarah's team moved. The joggers closed in from the east path. The street vendor abandoned his cart and approached from the west. Evelyn emerged from the car, flanked by 2 security personnel. Holloway noticed too late. He started to rise, but Sarah was already there, flashing a badge. Grant Holloway, I'm Sarah Voss with Archer Investigations. You need to come with me. Holloway's face went white, then red. You're recording this. Every word, Sarah confirmed. He turned to Talia, fury and betrayal warring in his eyes. You set me up. You threatened me, Talia said, standing. Her voice was steady now, all the fear burned away by adrenaline and something fiercer, vindication. You threatened others, and you just confessed to it. That recording won't hold up, Holloway snapped. You entrapped me. Actually, Richard Dane said, stepping into view with a briefcase, Ms. Brooks acted as a concerned citizen reporting credible threats, and you voluntarily admitted to multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. No entrapment necessary. Holloway's shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked like what he was, a man who'd gambled everything and lost. I want my lawyer, he said quietly. Smart choice, Sarah replied. She gestured to her team, who escorted Holloway toward a waiting vehicle. As they led him away, Evelyn approached Talia. You did well. Talia was shaking, the adrenaline draining out of her all at once. I thought I was going to throw up. But you didn't, Evelyn said. You held it together, and now we have everything we need. Marcus Delroy appeared, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. Ms. Brooks, I don't know how to thank you. You could start by making sure this never happens again, Talia said. Marcus blinked, surprised. Then he nodded. Fair enough. That evening, Talia sat in Evelyn's office while Sarah compiled the evidence. The recording was clean, damning, impossible to refute. Combined with the emails, financial records, and testimony from Talia and others, the case against Holloway was airtight. But the real bombshell came when Sarah pulled up the transaction history. Holloway wasn't the only one, Sarah said, turning her laptop toward the group. Look at these transfers. They're routed through Crescent Holdings, but the ultimate beneficiaries are shell accounts tied to 4 different entities, all registered in the Cayman Islands, all linked back to Rafiq's network. Jennifer leaned closer. How much are we talking? $700 million, Sarah said. Diverted from community investment funds, pension contributions, and operational budgets over the past 18 months. Holloway set up the infrastructure, but someone inside Delroy and Klein approved the transfers. Palmer's face went ashen. That's impossible. Every transfer requires dual authorization, which means 2 people signed off, Sarah said. One of them was Holloway. The other, she pulled up a signature log, was someone with C-level access. The room went silent. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Who? Sarah highlighted a name. Victor Chen, Chief Operating Officer. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. Victor's been with us for 15 years. And he's been stealing from you for at least 2 of them, Sarah said. She pulled up more documents, emails between Chen and Holloway, cryptic references to reallocation schedules and offshore compliance. He knew exactly what Holloway was doing, and he helped cover it up. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Where is he? According to his assistant, he left for a business trip to Hong Kong this morning, Sarah said. Scheduled return? Never. His wife filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. His house is on the market. He's running. Get him back, Marcus said, his voice like iron. I don't care what it takes. Get him back. Sarah nodded. Already on it. I've contacted federal authorities. If he tries to leave the country, he'll be flagged. Evelyn turned to Talia. Did you see any references to Chen in the documents? Talia thought back, sifting through hundreds of pages in her mind. Then it clicked. The payment routing schedule. The one that sends money through Crescent Holdings. The approver listed was VC Ops. I thought it was a department code. Victor Chen, Operations, Jennifer said, her voice hollow. Talia pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos she'd taken. There's more. Look at this email thread. She showed them a chain where Holloway discussed operational alignment with someone whose signature was just initials. VC. Sarah took the phone, her eyes scanning rapidly. This is good. This ties Chen directly to the scheme. Combined with the financial records, we can prove conspiracy. Marcus sank back into his chair, looking 10 years older. My COO and my outside counsel. 2 people I trusted completely. Trust is a weapon, Evelyn said quietly. They knew that, and they used it. The door opened and Richard Dane entered, his phone pressed to his ear. He listened for a moment, then lowered it. Victor Chen just tried to board a flight to Singapore. TSA flagged him. Federal agents are bringing him in for questioning. Marcus closed his eyes. Thank God. Don't thank God yet, Richard said, and thank Ms. Brooks. Without her findings, Chen would be halfway across the Pacific by now. All eyes turned to Talia. She felt the weight of their stares, gratitude, respect, something close to awe. It was uncomfortable, overwhelming. I just read the documents, she said softly. You did more than that, Marcus replied. You saved this company, and you might have saved a lot of people's livelihoods. Talia didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Over the next 48 hours, the story unraveled completely. Victor Chen, faced with irrefutable evidence and federal charges, cut a deal. He confessed to everything, the offshore accounts, the diverted funds, the coordination with Holloway and Rafiq. He provided names, dates, transaction records, the whole conspiracy laid bare. Rafiq al-Karim, sensing the walls closing in, withdrew from the partnership and left the country. Interpol issued a warrant, But Rafiq had resources and connections. He disappeared into a web of safe havens and diplomatic immunity. Grant Holloway faced 13 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. His assets were frozen, his law license suspended. The villa in the Maldives was seized, and Delroy and Klein began the long, painful process of rebuilding. On the third day after Chen's arrest, Evelyn summoned Talia to her office. "Sit," Evelyn said, her tone unreadable. Talia sat, exhausted and wary. Evelyn slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Inside was a contract, an employment contract, with Delroy and Klein. Talia's eyes widened. "What is this?" "An offer," Evelyn said. "Marcus wants to create a new position, strategic ethics advisor, someone who reviews contracts, monitors compliance, and flags potential fraud before it takes root. He wants you." Talia stared at the paper. "I'm not qualified for this." "You found a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that a dozen attorneys missed," Evelyn said dryly. "I'd say you're qualified." "I don't have a degree in law. I don't have—" "You have integrity," Evelyn interrupted. "You have intelligence. And you have something most people in that building will never have. The courage to speak up when it costs you everything." She leaned forward. "The salary is listed on page 3, along with benefits, clearance level, and reporting structure." Talia turned to page 3. Her breath caught. The salary was more than she'd made in 5 years at the Belmont. "This is real?" she whispered. "Very real," Evelyn said. "But there's a condition." Of course there was. "What condition?" "You report directly to me and to Marcus. No one else. You have full access to contracts, financials, communications, everything. And if you see something wrong, you speak up. Every time. No matter who it implicates." Talia met Evelyn's gaze. "You want me to be a watchdog." "I want you to be what you already are," Evelyn said. "Someone who refuses to look away." Talia looked down at the contract, her hands trembling. A week ago, she'd been invisible, replaceable. A name on a tag and a body in a uniform. Now she was being offered a seat at the table she'd once served. "Can I think about it?" Talia asked. "You have 24 hours, Evelyn replied. "After that, the offer expires." Talia took the folder and left. She walked through the Belmont lobby, past the place where she'd stood a week ago holding a silver tray, and out into the city that suddenly felt different, bigger, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. She thought about her grandmother, who'd crossed an ocean with nothing but hope and stubbornness. She thought about the knife she'd held, the fear she'd swallowed, the moment she'd decided to speak. And she thought about Grant Holloway's face when he realized he'd lost. 24 hours later, Talia Brooks signed the contract. Her first day as strategic ethics advisor began with a desk that wasn't hers and a title that felt like borrowed clothes. The office was small but real. 4 walls, a door that closed, a window overlooking the city. There was a nameplate waiting on the empty desk, sleek black letters on brushed steel. Talia Brooks, Strategic Ethics Advisor. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, half expecting it to disappear like smoke. It didn't. Marcus Delroy had made the announcement himself at the emergency board meeting 2 days prior. Talia hadn't been present, but Evelyn had played her the recording. Marcus's voice had been steady, resolute, nothing like the shaken man who'd nearly signed away his company. He told the board about Holloway's betrayal, Chen's conspiracy, and the $700 million that had been quietly stolen from under their noses. Then he told them about the woman who'd stopped it, a hotel server who spoke Arabic and refused to stay silent. The board had been skeptical at first. Who was she? What were her qualifications? Why wasn't this position going to someone with an MBA or a law degree? Marcus's response had been blunt. Because people with MBAs and law degrees are the ones who missed it. Ms. Brooks didn't, and if we want to make sure this never happens again, we need someone who sees what everyone else overlooks. The vote had been unanimous. Now Talia sat in her new office, staring at a computer screen that displayed access to systems she'd never dreamed of touching. Financial records, contract databases, email archives, communication logs. She had clearance that rivaled senior executives, and a mandate that was both simple and terrifying. Find the cracks before they become chasms. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Jennifer Oakes stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this. Talia accepted the cup gratefully. Thank you. Jennifer settled into the chair across from her, eyeing the empty office with an appraising look. You'll need to personalize this place. Maybe some plants, photos, something that says you actually work here. I'm still getting used to the idea that I do work here, Talia admitted. Get used to it fast, Jennifer said, not unkindly, because we're about to throw you into the deep end. Talia set down her coffee. What do you mean? Jennifer pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Talia. This is the preliminary forensic report from Sarah Voss. She's traced the stolen funds through 14 different shell companies, 6 countries, and roughly 47 individual transactions. Most of it dead ends in the Caymans, but there are 3 transfers that went somewhere else. Talia leaned forward, scanning the screen. The numbers were staggering. Millions moved in careful increments, disguised as consulting fees, operational costs, compliance expenses. Where did they go? That's the problem, Jennifer said. We don't know. The trail stops at a holding company called Meridian Global Solutions. Registered in Delaware, minimal footprint, no public filings. Sarah's team is digging, but so far it's a ghost. Why are you telling me this? Because Marcus wants you to help find it, Jennifer said. You found the first thread. He thinks you can find the rest. Talia's stomach nodded. I'm not an investigator. No, Jennifer agreed, but you see patterns. And this, she gestured to the tablet, is a pattern. Somewhere in these transactions is a signature, a tell, something that links Meridian back to Rafiq, or Holloway, or whoever else was pulling strings. We need you to find it. Talia took the tablet, her hands unsteady. When do you need this? Yesterday, Jennifer said with a wry smile. But realistically, we have a board meeting in 5 days. If we can prove where the money went and who's behind Meridian, we can freeze the accounts and start recovery proceedings. If we can't, she trailed off, but the implication was clear. If they couldn't, the thieves would vanish with $300 million. After Jennifer left, Talia sat alone with the tablet and a growing sense of dread. She'd spent the last week believing the worst was over. Holloway arrested, Chen in custody, the conspiracy exposed. But this felt different. This felt like she'd pulled back a curtain only to find another curtain behind it, and another behind that, layers of deception stacked so deep she couldn't see the bottom. She opened the forensic report and started reading. The transactions were meticulous, almost beautiful in their precision. Small amounts at first, 50,000 here, 80,000 there, gradually escalating to transfers in the millions. Each one was documented with invoices, approval codes, and digital signatures. Each one looked legitimate on the surface. But when Talia cross-referenced the approval codes with personnel records, she found something strange. 3 of the transactions had been approved by employees who no longer worked at Delroy & Klein. She pulled up the personnel files. The first was a junior analyst named Rebecca Marsh, employed for 6 months in 2022 before leaving for personal reasons. The second was a contracts manager named David Liu, who'd resigned abruptly in early 2023. The third was an administrative assistant named Kelly Provost, terminated for policy violations 6 months ago. Talia dug deeper. Rebecca Marsh's final approval had been logged 2 weeks after her termination date. David Liu's signature appeared on documents dated 3 months after he'd left the company. And Kelly Provost's credentials had been used to authorize a $4 million transfer while she was on a leave of absence following a car accident. Someone had stolen their identities, or someone had created fake employees. Talia's pulse quickened. She pulled up the email archives and searched for correspondence involving the 3 names. Hundreds of messages appeared, routine updates, project confirmations, meeting schedules, all perfectly normal, all perfectly fake. She called Jennifer. I found something, Talia said without preamble. The approvals for the Meridian transfers were done using credentials from employees who weren't actually working here. Either their identities were stolen after they left, or they never existed in the first place. There was a pause on the other end. Then Jennifer's voice, sharp and focused. Can you prove it? I have the termination dates, the approval logs, and email records that don't match real communication patterns. It's enough to raise flags, but I'd need a T to verify the digital signatures. Send me what you have, Jennifer said. I'll get it on it immediately. Talia forwarded the files and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. If the employee identities were fabricated, it meant someone inside Delroy and Klein had created them, someone with access to HR systems, payroll, and authorization protocols, someone who could build a fake employee from scratch and use them as a conduit for theft. The same someone who'd helped Holloway and Chen. Her phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. My office, now. Talia grabbed her tablet and headed upstairs. Evelyn's office was in controlled chaos. Sarah Voss hunched over a laptop, Marcus pacing near the window, and Richard Dane reviewing documents with the intensity of a surgeon mid-operation. They all looked up as Talia entered. Tell them what you told me, Jennifer said. She'd apparently beaten Talia there. Talia repeated her findings, the fake employees, the stolen credentials, the pattern of fraud that went deeper than Holloway and Chen. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. If the credentials were fabricated, we can trace the creation point. Every user account leaves a digital trail, IP addresses, login times, system access logs. Give me an hour. You have 30 minutes, Marcus said. His voice was controlled, but Talia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched behind his back. This was a man watching his company bleed out in real time. Sarah didn't argue. She just worked. 27 minutes later, she looked up. Got it. Everyone crowded around her screen. The fake accounts were created from a single workstation on the executive floor, Sarah said. Terminal ID, EX07, registered to... She scrolled down. Helen Varga, executive assistant to the CFO. Jennifer's face went white. Helen, that's impossible. She's been with us for 8 years. She's the one, Sarah interrupted, pulling up security footage. The timestamp showed Helen Varga at her desk late at night, alone, her fingers moving across a keyboard. The date matched the creation of Rebecca Marsh's fake account. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Helen. She had access to everything, Richard said quietly. HR systems, payroll, executive schedules. She could create employees, authorize payments, cover tracks, and no one would question her because she was part of the furniture. Talia felt sick. She'd seen Helen dozens of times. A pleasant woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a collection of framed family photos on her desk. She'd always smiled at Talia, asked how her day was going, complimented her earrings once, and she'd been stealing millions. Where is she now? Marcus demanded. Sarah checked the employee locator system. According to this, she's at her desk. Marcus turned to security. Bring her up, quietly. 10 minutes later, Helen Varga sat across from Marcus in Evelyn's office, looking confused and worried. She was a small woman, neatly dressed in a cardigan and slacks, her graying hair pulled into a sensible bun. She looked like someone's favorite aunt. Mr. Delroy, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Is everything all right? Security said you needed to see me urgently. Marcus didn't sit. He stood by the window, his back to her, his voice cold. Helen? How long have you worked here? 8 years this November, Helen said. Why? Is there a problem with my performance? Your performance has been exceptional, Marcus said, turning to face her, which is why this is so difficult. He nodded to Sarah, who turned her laptop around. The screen showed the security footage. Helen at her desk, creating fake accounts. Helen's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then her expression hardened into something Talia had never seen before, cold, calculating, defiant. I want my lawyer, Helen said quietly. You're going to need one, Marcus replied. Sarah leaned forward. Helen Varga, we have evidence linking you to the creation of fraudulent employee accounts, unauthorized fund transfers totaling over $300 million, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can cooperate now, or you can wait for federal charges. Your choice. Helen's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I'm not saying anything without legal representation. Fine, Sarah said. She gestured to security. Escort Ms. Varga to a conference room and make sure she doesn't leave the building, and someone get her devices. Computer, phone, tablet, everything. As Helen was led away, she looked directly at Talia. There was no warmth in her eyes, no recognition, just ice. After she was gone, Marcus slumped into a chair. "How many more?" he asked, his voice hollow. "How many more people in this company sold us out?" "We're running a full audit," Sarah said. "Every employee, every vendor, every contractor. If there are others, we'll find them." Talia spoke up, her voice small. "What about Meridian Global Solutions? Did Helen create that too?" Sarah shook her head. "Meridian was set up before Helen's employment here, which means someone else was running this operation, and Helen was just a piece." "Rafik," Jennifer said. "Possibly," Sarah agreed, "but we need proof, and the only people who can give us that are in custody or on the run." Marcus looked at Talia. "What do you think?" The question caught her off guard. "Me?" "You've been right about everything so far," Marcus said. "What's your instinct?" Talia thought about the patterns she'd seen, the careful layering, the redundancies, the way each piece of the fraud was isolated so that if one fell, the others could continue. "I think Rafik built this over years. I think Holloway and Chen and Helen were all part of it, but they didn't know the full picture. Each one had their role, and none of them could expose the whole thing because they only saw their piece." "A compartmentalized conspiracy," Richard murmured. "Exactly," Talia said, "which means the key to Meridian isn't in what they did. It's in what they all had in common." Sarah's eyes lit up. "A common contact point." "Or a common handler," Talia added. Sarah pulled up a new screen, communication logs for Holloway, Chen, and Helen. She ran a pattern analysis looking for overlapping contacts, shared IP addresses, anything that connected them outside of Delroy and Klein. 3 minutes later, she found it. "They all received encrypted messages from the same email domain," Sarah said, "sent through a server in Switzerland. The messages were deleted immediately after being read, but the metadata is still there, and the domain is registered to—" She paused, her face going pale. "Oh, hell." "What?" Marcus demanded. Sarah turned the screen around. The domain was registered to a law firm, Mercer Stone LLP, Holloway's firm, but the specific account belonged to someone else, Patricia Holloway, Grant Holloway's ex-wife. The room went silent. "She wasn't divorcing him to get away," Jennifer said slowly. "She was divorcing him to create distance, legal separation so she could claim ignorance if he got caught. And she's the one who created Meridian," Sarah finished. "She's been running the whole operation." Marcus stood abruptly. "Where is she?" Sarah's fingers flew. "Last known location, Geneva. She withdrew $20 million from a Swiss account 4 days ago. She's in the wind." "Can we freeze her accounts?" Richard asked. "We can try," Sarah said, "but if she's smart, and clearly she is, she's already moved everything into untraceable assets, gold, art, cryptocurrency. By the time we get a court order, she'll be gone." Marcus's hands balled into fists. "So that's it? She just wins?" "Not necessarily," Evelyn said. She'd been silent until now, watching everything unfold with her characteristic calm. "We may not be able to catch her immediately, but we can expose her, and exposure has consequences." "What are you suggesting?" Marcus asked. "We go public," Evelyn said. "Full transparency. We release the findings, name every person involved, and show exactly how they stole from this company. We don't hide the fact that we were victims of a sophisticated fraud. We own it. And in doing so, we make Patricia Holloway toxic. No bank will work with her. No country will give her safe harbor. She'll spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder." Jennifer nodded slowly. "And it protects our reputation, shows we took action the moment we knew." "It also makes us look vulnerable," Palmer said. He'd been quiet this whole time, looking like a man who'd seen his profession gutted. "Investors don't like vulnerable, and investors like transparency," Evelyn countered. "They like companies that admit mistakes and fix them. What they don't like is finding out months later that we covered up a billion-dollar fraud." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Talia. "You started this by refusing to stay silent. What would you do?" Talia swallowed hard. Every eye in the room was on her. "I'd tell the truth," she said finally, "because the alternative is living with a lie. And lies always come out eventually. Better to control the narrative than have it control you." Marcus nodded. Then we tell the truth. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon. Marcus stood at a podium in the Belmont's Grand Ballroom, flanked by Jennifer, Evelyn, and a crisis management team that had worked through the night. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the seats. The air was electric with anticipation. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. He laid out the entire conspiracy: Rafiq's scheme, Holloway's betrayal, Chen's complicity, Helen's fraud, and Patricia Holloway's orchestration. He showed documents, presented timelines, and named every person involved. He admitted that the company had been compromised from the inside and that $700 million had been stolen. And then he introduced Talia. She hadn't expected that, hadn't prepared for it, but Marcus insisted. "This woman," he said, gesturing to where Talia stood off to the side, "saved this company, not because she was trained to, not because it was her job, but because she refused to look away when she saw something wrong. Her courage and integrity are the reason we're standing here today, telling you the truth instead of hiding it." The camera swiveled toward her. Flashes erupted. Talia felt like she was standing under a spotlight that could burn through skin. A reporter called out, "Ms. Brooks, what made you speak up?" Talia stepped toward the microphone, her heart in her throat. "I grew up learning that silence makes you complicit. My grandmother taught me that if you see wrong and say nothing, you become part of it. I didn't want to be part of it." Another reporter. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Talia admitted. "But being scared isn't a reason to stay silent. It's a reason to be brave." The questions kept coming, but Marcus stepped in, redirecting the focus to the recovery plan, the new safeguards being implemented, the independent audits being conducted. When it was over, Talia slipped out through a side door, her hands shaking. Evelyn found her in the hallway. "You did well." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Talia said. "That's normal," Evelyn replied. "But you should know, what you just did in there? That was the hardest part. Everything after this gets easier." Talia wanted to believe her. Over the next 72 hours, the story exploded. Major news outlets picked it up. Financial analysts dissected it. Social media turned Talia into an unlikely hero. Her face was on magazine covers, her name trending online. Strangers sent her messages, some supportive, some hateful, some bizarre. She hated all of it. But the company's response was different. Investors, initially rattled, began to stabilize. The transparency was working. Delroy and Klein's stock took a hit, but it didn't collapse. Clients stayed. New partnerships formed. And slowly, painfully, the company began to rebuild. Sarah Voss's team continued the hunt for Patricia Holloway, but the woman was a ghost. She'd vanished into a network of shell identities and offshore havens, untouchable and unreachable. But the stolen funds started coming back. Interpol seized accounts in the Caymans. Swiss authorities froze assets tied to Meridian. One by one, the pieces of the stolen empire were dismantled. It would take years to recover everything, but the process had begun. And through it all, Talia worked. She reviewed contracts, flagged irregularities, built systems to prevent another Holloway from slipping through. She trained staff on red flags, created checklists for due diligence, and established protocols for whistleblower protection. She became the safeguard the company had never known it needed. 3 weeks after the press conference, Talia received a letter. It was handwritten, postmarked from Switzerland, no return address. Inside was a single sentence: "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Well played." It was signed with initials, PH. Talia stared at the letter for a long time. Then she took a photo of it and sent it to Sarah Voss. "She's watching," Talia wrote. Sarah's response was immediate. "Let her watch. She's finished." But Talia wasn't so sure, because people like Patricia Holloway didn't just disappear. They waited. They planned. And when the moment was right, they came back. Talia folded the letter and locked it in her desk drawer. Then she went back to work. The letter sat in Talia's drawer for 3 days before she could bring herself to look at it again. Every time she opened the desk to retrieve a file or a pen, she'd see the edge of the envelope peeking out, a reminder that somewhere in the world, Patricia Holloway was watching, waiting, planning her next move. The woman had orchestrated a billion-dollar theft, manipulated some of the smartest people in finance, and vanished into thin air with enough money to fund a small nation. And now she was sending letters like they were old friends exchanging pleasantries. It made Talia's skin crawl, but it also made her angry. Because Patricia Holloway had stolen from people who'd worked their entire lives to build something. She'd destroyed careers, shattered trust, and walked away as if none of it mattered. And the only consequence she faced was exile. A luxurious, well-funded exile where she could sip champagne on a yacht while her victims picked up the pieces. Talia refused to let that be the end of the story. On the fourth day, she called Sarah Voss. "I need to know everything you have on Patricia Holloway," Talia said, without preamble. Sarah's voice was cautious. "Why?" "Because she's not done, and neither am I." There was a pause. Then Sarah said, "Come to my office. Bring the letter." Sarah's office was in a nondescript building in Midtown, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. Inside, it was all business: glass walls, whiteboards covered in flowcharts, monitors displaying financial data that looked like the Matrix. Sarah sat at a standing desk, a cold brew coffee in one hand and a stylus in the other, marking up documents on a tablet. She looked up as Talia entered. "Let me see it." Talia handed over the letter. Sarah read it once, then again, her expression unreadable. "She's playing games." "I know." "She wants you to know she's out there. Wants you to feel hunted." Sarah set the letter down. "The question is why? If she's smart, and we know she is, she'd stay silent, disappear completely. But she's reaching out, which means she wants something." "Or she's testing me," Talia said. "Possibly." Sarah pulled up a file on her computer. "Here's what we know about Patricia Holloway. Born Patricia Chen in Hong Kong, 1978. Dual citizenship, fluent in Mandarin, English, and French. She married Grant Holloway in 2005, shortly after he made partner at Mercer Stone. On paper, she was a stay-at-home wife, charity work, social events, the usual upper-class performance. But in reality, she was running an entirely separate operation." Sarah clicked through a series of images. Patricia at galas, Patricia on yachts, Patricia shaking hands with politicians and business moguls. She looked polished, elegant, the kind of woman who could open doors with a smile and a handshake. "She used her social connections to build a network," Sarah continued. "Art dealers, private bankers, offshore accountants, people who don't ask questions as long as the money's good. We've traced her movements over the past 5 years: Geneva, Singapore, Monaco, Dubai. Always high-end, always connected, always one step ahead of scrutiny." "How did she meet Rafik?" Talia asked. "Through Grant, initially. Rafik hired Mercer Stone for a deal in 2019. Patricia was at a dinner party where they met. According to witnesses, they hit it off immediately. Within 6 months, they were partnering on investments. Within a year, they'd built the infrastructure for Meridian." Talia studied the photos. Patricia's smile never reached her eyes. She had the look of someone who was always calculating, always 3 moves ahead. "What about family?" Talia asked. "Does she have anyone who could pressure her to come back?" Sarah shook her head. "Parents deceased? No siblings? No children?" The divorce from Grant was finalized 2 weeks before his arrest, perfectly timed so she could claim she had no knowledge of his activities. She's unattached, unaccountable, and untraceable. "So how do we find her?" Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "We don't, not directly, but we can make her come to us." Talia frowned. "How?" "By threatening the one thing she cares about more than freedom," Sarah said. "Her money." Over the next week, Sarah and her team built a strategy. Patricia Holloway had moved her fortune through a complex web of shell companies, cryptocurrency wallets, and offshore accounts, but money always left a trail. The key was finding the pressure points: the accounts she accessed regularly, the assets she couldn't afford to lose, the connections she relied on to stay hidden. Sarah's team identified 3 critical nodes. The first was an art collection worth over $50 million, stored in a Geneva free port under a shell company Patricia controlled. The second was a real estate portfolio in Monaco, including a penthouse with a view of the Mediterranean. The third was a network of cryptocurrency wallets that Patricia used for liquid funds, untraceable in theory, but trackable if you knew what to look for. "We can freeze the art and the real estate," Sarah explained during a strategy session in Marcus's office. "Swiss and Monegasque authorities are cooperating, but the crypto is trickier. We'd need to trace the wallets to an exchange she uses, then get the exchange to freeze her accounts. That requires proof of criminal activity tied directly to those wallets." "Which we have," Jennifer said. She pulled up a transaction log. These 3 transfers from Meridian match the amounts that went into Patricia's wallets, down to the cent. Can we get a warrant? Marcus asked. We can try, Richard Dane said, but international crypto regulations are a nightmare. Even with proof, it could take months. We don't have months, Marcus said, frustration creeping into his voice. She could move everything by then. Talia had been quiet, listening, absorbing. Now she spoke up. What if we don't wait for a warrant? Everyone turned to her. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Patricia sent me a letter because she wants to know if I'm a threat, Talia said slowly. She's testing me. So what if I test her back? Evelyn leaned forward. You want to bait her. I want to make her think I know something she doesn't, Talia said. Something that threatens her money. If she's as smart as we think, she'll reach out again. And when she does, we'll have her. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's dangerous. If she thinks you're a threat, she won't send another polite letter. She'll eliminate you. Not if she thinks I have leverage, Talia countered. Not if she believes that hurting me would trigger something worse. Marcus shook his head. Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait, you. Well, you already did, Talia said quietly. When you sent me to meet Holloway in the park. This is the same thing, just on a bigger scale. That was controlled, Marcus argued. We had Sarah's team, we had surveillance, we had a plan. This is different. Patricia Holloway is in another country, surrounded by people who'll do whatever she pays them to do. We can't protect you from that. Then don't protect me, Talia said. Just give me the tools to protect myself. The room fell silent. Evelyn spoke first. What do you need? Talia outlined her plan. It was simple, audacious, and terrifying. She would send Patricia a message, vague enough to seem like a bluff, specific enough to make her nervous. She'd hint at knowledge of a transaction, a hidden account, something Patricia couldn't afford to ignore. The goal wasn't to catch her immediately, it was to make her move. And when she moved, Sarah's team would be watching. If this works, we map her entire network, Sarah said, warming to the idea. Every contact she makes, every account she accesses, every person she reaches out to, it's a digital dragnet. And if it doesn't work, Richard asked, then Patricia stays hidden, and we're no worse off than we are now, Talia said. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his expression conflicted. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Talia said, because if I don't, she wins, and I'm tired of watching bad people win. 2 days later, Talia sent the message. It was brief, cryptic, designed to unsettle. I found the Singapore account. You moved the funds too quickly. Forensics missed it, but I didn't. We should talk before this becomes public. She used an encrypted email service, routed through multiple servers to mask her location. Then she waited. 24 hours passed. Nothing. 48 hours. Still nothing. Sarah's team monitored every digital channel, email, phone, social media, dark web forums. They watched Patricia's known associates, flagged any unusual financial activity, tracked movements through immigration databases. 72 hours in, Talia started to think the plan had failed. And then her phone rang. The number was blocked, the call routed through so many proxies that even Sarah's team couldn't trace it in real time. Talia answered, her heart hammering. Ms. Brooks? The voice was smooth, cultured, with a faint British accent. Patricia Holloway. You're persistent. I'll give you that. Talia forced herself to sound calm. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Indeed, Patricia sounded amused. Tell me about this Singapore account. Tell me why you sent me a letter, Talia countered. A soft laugh. Touché. I suppose we're both curious creatures. A pause. I sent the letter because I wanted to see if you were a true believer or just an opportunist. Most people who expose fraud are looking for a payout or a promotion. But you? You actually seem to care about right and wrong. I found that quaint. And now? Now I'm wondering if you're bluffing, Patricia said. There is no Singapore account. I'm very careful about my financial architecture. If there were a loose thread, I'd know about it. Then why are you calling? Talia asked. Silence. Then, because even the best architects occasionally miss a detail, And because I've learned that underestimating people like you is how empires fall. People like me? Believers, Patricia said, her tone almost pitying. People who think honesty and integrity are currencies that matter. They're not. The only currency that matters is power, and you, Miss Brooks, have stumbled into a game you don't understand. Then educate me, Talia said. Patricia laughed again, genuine this time. Oh, I like you. You've got spine. That's rare. Her voice turned serious. Here's your education. The money you think was stolen? It was already ours. Delroy and Klein was a bloated, inefficient machine run by men who inherited wealth and mistook it for competence. We simply redistributed resources to people who knew how to use them. By lying and stealing, Talia said. By recognizing opportunity, Patricia corrected. Grant was weak, Victor was greedy, Helen was desperate. I gave them what they wanted, and they gave me what I needed. That's not theft, that's commerce. Commerce requires consent, Talia shot back. You didn't ask, you just took. And now you're trying to take it back, Patricia said. Which brings us to the real question. What do you want, Ms. Brooks? Talia didn't hesitate. I want you to face consequences. Consequences. Patricia sounded genuinely curious. Like what? Prison? I'm in a country that doesn't extradite. Asset seizure? My money is in systems your government can't touch. Public shame? I don't care what people think of me, so tell me, what consequences could you possibly impose? The ones that matter to you, Talia said quietly. Your network, your reputation in the circles that protect you, your ability to operate. Right now, you're invisible. But if I make you visible, if I expose every account, every shell company, every person who's helped you, you become toxic. No bank will work with you. No fixer will take your calls. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when the next leak will hit. The silence that followed was long and heavy. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had lost its amusement. You're threatening me. I'm promising you, Talia said. Return the money, all of it, and I'll make sure the story ends with your exile. Keep it, and I'll make sure the story never ends. You can't deliver on that threat, Patricia said. You're one woman with access to partial records. You don't have the reach. Try me, Talia said, and hung up. Sarah's team moved immediately, triangulating the call, mapping the proxies, tracing the digital breadcrumbs Patricia had left behind. Within an hour, they had a location. Geneva, as expected, but with a twist. Patricia had been at a private terminal at Geneva Airport when she made the call. She's about to run, Sarah said, pulling up flight manifests. There's a private jet scheduled to depart for Dubai in 90 minutes. Marcus grabbed his phone. I'll call Interpol. They won't make it in time, Sarah said. Swiss authorities need a warrant, and that takes hours. Then we stop her another way, Evelyn said. She turned to Talia. Did you record the call? Talia held up her phone. Every word. Evelyn's smile was sharp. Then we go public. Immediately. Within 30 minutes, Talia's recording of the call was in the hands of every major news outlet. The audio was damning, Patricia admitting to orchestrating the fraud, dismissing the victims, threatening consequences. Combined with the forensic evidence Sarah's team had compiled, it painted a picture of a woman who saw herself as above the law. The story exploded faster than the first press conference. News channels ran it on loop. Social media tore Patricia apart. And most critically, the financial institutions that had been quietly sheltering her money suddenly found themselves in the spotlight. Swiss banks froze accounts. Cryptocurrency exchanges locked wallets. Art dealers pulled listings. Real estate brokers distanced themselves. Within 6 hours, Patricia Holloway's carefully constructed empire began to crumble. Her plane never left the tarmac. Swiss police, suddenly motivated by international pressure and public outrage, detained her for questioning. No charges yet. Switzerland was still navigating the legal complexities. But her passport was flagged, her movements restricted. She was trapped. 2 weeks later, a deal was brokered. Patricia Holloway would return 80% of the stolen funds in exchange for reduced charges and a guarantee of no extradition to the United States. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't full justice. But it was something. Marcus signed the agreement with a pen that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 80%, he said bitterly. She keeps 200 million and gets to live in a Swiss chalet. 200 million is better than 700 million, Jennifer said. And she's finished. No one will work with her. She'll live the rest of her life in luxury, but she'll live it alone. That's not justice, Marcus said. No, Evelyn agreed, but it's accountability, and sometimes that's the best we can do. The money began flowing back. Not all at once. Patricia dragged the process out, testing boundaries, looking for loopholes. But Sarah's team monitored every transaction, verified every transfer, ensured that not a single dollar disappeared. Slowly, painfully, Delroy and Klein stabilized. Employees got their pensions back. Community programs that had been defunded were restored. The company that had nearly collapsed began to breathe again. And through it all, Talia worked. She built systems, trained staff, created safeguards. She established an independent ethics board with rotating members and transparent reporting. She wrote protocols for whistleblower protection that had real teeth, real consequences for retaliation. She turned the strategic ethics advisor position from a reactive role into a proactive one, identifying risks before they became crises. Months passed. The headlines faded. Life at Delroy and Klein returned to something resembling normal, but Talia knew better than to call it normal, because normal was what had allowed the fraud to happen in the first place. Normal was people looking away, trusting too easily, believing that someone else was paying attention. She refused to let the company go back to normal. 6 months after Patricia's detention, Talia received a package. No return address, postmarked from Geneva. Inside was a leather-bound journal, expensive and unused, with a note tucked into the first page. For your memoirs. You've earned them. P.H. Talia stared at the journal for a long time. Then she donated it to a women's shelter, along with a check for the amount the journal was worth. She didn't need Patricia Holloway's gifts. She didn't need her acknowledgement. What she needed was to make sure this never happened again. A year after the conspiracy was exposed, Marcus Delroy called an all-staff meeting. The entire company gathered in the Belmont's Grand Ballroom, the same room where the press conference had been held, where the truth had been told. Marcus stood at the podium, older now, grayer, but steadier. I want to talk about what we've learned, he began. A year ago, this company nearly collapsed because we trusted the wrong people, because we assumed that titles and experience equaled integrity, because we didn't ask the hard questions. He paused, letting the words settle. We've spent the past year rebuilding, not just our finances, but our culture, our values, our commitment to doing business the right way, even when it's harder. And we couldn't have done that without the person who had the courage to speak up when everyone else stayed silent. He gestured to the side of the stage, where Talia sat beside Evelyn and Jennifer. Talia Brooks didn't just save this company. She showed us what real leadership looks like. It's not about having the most degrees or the biggest office. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. The room erupted in applause. Talia felt her face flush, uncomfortable with the attention but unable to escape it. Marcus continued, which is why I'm announcing a new initiative, the Brooks Fellowship, a program that identifies and supports employees who demonstrate integrity, courage, and a commitment to ethical practice. Because if this company is going to thrive, it needs more people like Talia Brooks. More applause, louder this time. After the meeting, Talia slipped away to her office, needing a moment alone. But Evelyn found her there, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. You can't hide forever, Evelyn said. I'm not hiding, Talia protested. I'm just regrouping. Evelyn smiled. You changed this place. You know that, right? I just did what needed to be done. That's what makes it extraordinary, Evelyn said. Most people see what needs to be done and convince themselves someone else will do it. You didn't. Talia looked out the window at the city below. Millions of people, thousands of buildings, countless stories of right and wrong playing out every second. Do you think it'll last? She asked. The changes we made? I think it'll last as long as people like you are here to protect them, Evelyn said, which is why you can't leave. Talia turned, surprised. I wasn't planning to. Good, Evelyn said, because this company needs you, and honestly, so do I. It was the closest thing to sentiment Evelyn had ever expressed, and it caught Talia off guard. Thank you, Talia said quietly. Evelyn nodded once, then turned to leave, but she paused at the door. Your grandmother would be proud. Talia's throat tightened. How do you know? Because I would be, Evelyn said, if you were mine. And then she was gone. Talia sat alone in her office, the weight of the past year settling over her like a blanket. She thought about the woman she'd been, invisible, insignificant, overlooked. She thought about the moment she'd stepped forward in that boardroom, the moment everything changed. And she thought about the small token sitting on her shelf, a replica of her old name tag from the Belmont, the one that said Talia Brooks, server. She'd kept it as a reminder, not of where she'd come from, but of what she'd refused to become. She'd refused to be silent. She'd refused to be complicit. She'd refused to disappear. And in refusing, she'd done something no one expected. She'd changed who got to speak in rooms that had always belonged to someone else. Talia Brooks, strategic ethics advisor, leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. There would always be people like Patricia Holloway, always be schemes and traps and corruption hiding in plain sight. But now there was also her, and she wasn't going anywhere.